Mark back to Bill and the Boys. This is Halloween horrors. Now, this is something slightly different. We love Halloween. Me and the boys love Halloween. So just as something different to get everybody in the mood for the best month of the year, we'll be telling little stories. Little ghost stories, little horror stories. Most of them true. All of them weird. So the one we'd like to say about today is the story of the Gorbals vampire. Which is a remarkable story. So it takes place in September in 1954. So some background to this. The Gorbals is in Glasgow, and rumour had started to circulate amongst school children that a vampire with iron teeth had kidnapped, murdered, and feasted on the corpses of 2 local children. They were never named, because it didn't happen. But rumour started to spread like wildfire. And they made a different stuff in Scotland. What would you think would scare most children had a very different effect. And the kids, as a collective, decided that they didn't want to be the next victim of the Gorbals vampire. So all arranged that they were going to head to the southern necropolis, which is a very large graveyard. So in the southern necropolis in the Gorbals, there's possibly 50,000 corpses buried. There's about 4,000 gravestones, but there's a lot of unmarked graves there as well. So the kids have decided they'll go get him. They're going to go hunt the Gorbals vampire. And they did. This is nuts, but it's true. So en masse, all of the school kids congregate at the cemetery, and we're talking hundreds, right? Not like 10, 20, 30 kids. Hundreds. 200, 300, 400 kids turned up, armed to the teeth, to find and kill the Gorbals vampire. And I'm not joking. They came with bottles and knives and bats and you name it, they had it. Dogs. They came to kill. They came to find and kill the Gorbals vampire as revenge for the 2 fallen boys, and to make sure no one else was going to be taken by him. So the kids go looking through the graveyard for the vampire. Now, what would have been quite gnarly about this is it's September, and it's evening, and it's Glasgow. It would have been quite dark by the time the kids turned up. Now, behind the necropolis was a foundry, an iron foundry, ironically enough. And everybody that was there would say that when the kind of the furnaces would go up, the whole graveyard would light up like red and orange from the furnaces. So they'd say you could see the silhouettes of the kids zipping about, but that also enhanced. They thought they could see the vampires zipping around and hiding between the tombstones. They'd all go and run after him. The furnace would go up again, and it would all light up red through the fog, and they'd try and find him. So word got out quick. Something's going on. There's like 300-400 kids in the graveyard armed to the teeth. So a police officer was called to investigate. So he turns up thinking, all right, and couldn't believe what he saw, because you wouldn't. I mean, there are hundreds of kids, aged between the ages of about 6 up to the age of about 15, armed to the teeth, looking for a vampire. He tried to disperse the kids. The kids were going nowhere. Right? The kids were like, we're going no. Just ignored him. There's no way he could corral all these kids, and they carried on hunting the vampire. It's mental, but it's true. So the kids only went home when it started raining. So it started raining quite heavily, and the kids were like, okay, we're done for tonight, we're going, and left. But the next night they all came back. It's crazy but true. So the next night all of the kids came back again to find the vampire, and went through the exact same thing, from the lights, the furnaces lighting up those gravestones, running around trying to find the vampire. And they did this for another 2 nights. They came back every night trying to find this vampire, and there was nothing they could do to stop them. Now eventually there was a combination of the kids losing interest after 3 or 4 nights of the vampire not finding him, and also a combination of, by this point, the schools have been informed and were telling the kids, do not be going to the graveyard to find a vampire. So how did this come about? Where did this come from? Where did this iron-teethed vampire come from? Well, there was a comic book that was doing the rounds at the time, and it was this one. In the 1950s, horror comics had really found their kind of feet. You had things like that one. You had the Tales from the Crypt. You had the Haunt of Horror. You had the Vault of Terror, shock and suspense stories, weird science. They were doing really big business, and it was in this year, it was in 1954, that America had just introduced the Comics Code as a result of those books. In America, it was seen as those books were lending to children not being able to read, childhood illiteracy, which is nonsense if you think about it. If kids are reading anything, it's a good thing. But they thought because kids were reading those, that's why illiteracy levels were going up. And also, those EC comics, I love them. I collected the hardback volumes of them. And every horrific thing you can think of were in those EC comics. And it was tasty. The EC thing in America got on their high horse about it, and the Comics Code was introduced, and the Comics Code was really strict. And the Comics Code still stands today. But it wasn't affected in the UK. So we didn't have that same thing. So a lot of these comics were being burned and banned, found their way to the UK. And inside that comic that I've just shown you was this story. The Vampire with the Iron Teeth. So it looks likely that that's where they come from. Now, the annoying thing about that is it means that the people that got on their high horses about the horror comics corrupting kids were kind of proved right at this point, which really bothers me. But you can't argue they didn't have a point. So what happened next? So you might have heard the story of the Gorbals vampire. You might not have heard the story of what happened next. So a Christian group got involved when they heard the story, and along with the National Union of Teachers, taking what they had heard about what had happened in the Comics Code in the USA, took this all the way to Parliament. So the Gorbals vampire was brought up in the Houses of Parliament. It was discussed by MPs, and it resulted in the 1955 Children and Young Persons Harmful Publications Act being passed, which still stands today. Now, I'm not going to badmouth that act, because I do think it is relevant that children, what children have access to, should definitely have a degree of censorship. I wouldn't say censorship. I would say that age appropriate is exactly that, age appropriate. And maybe 6 and 7 year olds shouldn't have been reading the Tales from the Crypt and things like that. But, you know, that's the job of the parent. So that's what happened. Now, there's an irony here, that we assume it came from a horror comic, that the horror comic got the blame, but the same Christian group that started the protest had also been teaching quite a lot of hellfire and brimstone in the local area at the time. And a sermon was given shortly before this began that involved the passage Daniel 7:7 from the Bible, which reads, "Behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth." So was it EC Comics, or was it something far more biblical, or was there indeed a vampire wandering around a cemetery with iron teeth? We'll never know. But what a remarkable story, and it's completely true. You can Google it, you can find out. It is a kind of celebrated, forgotten part of history now. People are remembering it now, and the internet's helping that a lot. And this has recently appeared in the Gorbals, and what a beautiful thing. Check this out. So there's a mural to the Gorbals vampire. But what an odd piece of history, what a remarkable piece of history, and it just makes me smile that those kids were mob-handed to kill that vampire. I think what a community, you know, and they're made of different stuff in Scotland. English kids would have been terrified. Scottish kids just, let's get armed and kill it. And I love that. I love that so much. But that's it for this one. We will have another weird horror story coming up soon. If you enjoyed that, please hit the like button. Remember to subscribe. It helps us massively in a world where you can be anything at all. Just be nice. And until Halloween, stay scared.